The small town was buzzing with excitement that afternoon. There was a local music gathering held in the old community hall, a place that had seen generations of pianists, violinists, and singers take their turns performing. The wooden floors creaked slightly under the weight of the audience, who were slowly settling into their seats. It wasn't a grand concert hall, but the intimacy made every note feel personal, as if the music could reach into the heart of anyone listening. Among the attendees, one figure stood out immediately. He had a certain air about him, a quiet confidence that bordered on arrogance. Known as a highly skilled pianist, he had played in prestigious venues and had won several awards. His sharp suit and polished shoes reflected his meticulous nature. Every movement he made seemed calculated, every glance deliberate. He had a reputation for his technical precision, and many admired him, though some found his pride off-putting. Across the hall, in the corner where the light was soft and warm, sat a woman who seemed entirely different. She had a calm presence, not seeking attention, yet somehow people noticed her. She was dressed simply, her clothing practical but neat, and she carried herself with quiet dignity. Her hands, delicate but sure, rested on the keys of an old piano tucked against the wall. Unlike the elite pianist, she wasn't known for any competitions or awards. Most people in the room didn't know her, but there was something magnetic about her calm focus. She seemed to speak to the piano like an old friend, fingers moving naturally over the keys as if guided by instinct. The room hummed with the low murmur of conversation, cups clinking, and the occasional laughter of children. Musicians tuning their instruments added another layer to the atmosphere. It was a day meant for music lovers to enjoy each other's talents, but for some, it was also a stage for showing superiority. The elitist pianist had arrived early, scanning the room and noting the familiar faces of local patrons, music teachers, and critics who often attended such events. He took his seat at a grand piano set prominently at the center of the hall. He touched the keys lightly, listening to the sound and nodding with approval. Every note rang clear and precise, a testament to his years of rigorous training. He looked around and noticed the woman by the corner piano. He observed her quietly at first, almost dismissively, as if she were merely another amateur in the room. But then he saw her hands glide over the keys, producing a melody that was soft, simple, and yet unusually captivating. There was no showmanship, no attempt to impress, just pure, heartfelt music. Curiosity mixed with a hint of challenge. The elitist pianist leaned back and watched as she continued to play. Something about the way she connected with the piano felt different. It was not flashy or technical. It did not showcase scales or complex rhythms, yet it drew him in. It drew everyone in. People nearby had stopped talking, their eyes fixed on her as she played. There was a warmth and honesty in her music that made the room feel smaller and cozier, as if everyone were being invited into her world. After a few moments, the elitist pianist straightened in his seat. A smile, a little forced, crossed his face. He was known for never backing down from a challenge, and this seemed like the perfect opportunity to assert his skill. He walked over, clapping politely, and said loud enough for a few nearby listeners to hear, "That was interesting. Would you like to have a piano duel?" His tone was teasing but had an edge of superiority, as if he was confident the outcome was already decided. The woman paused, her fingers hovering over the keys. She looked up, meeting his gaze without fear or arrogance. She was calm, not surprised by the challenge, nor intimidated. She simply nodded, accepting the offer with a quiet confidence. The audience around them stirred, whispering among themselves. Some were excited, anticipating a spectacle. Others were skeptical, unsure how a simple pianist could stand against someone so experienced and technically skilled. The elitist pianist returned to his grand piano, already planning the pieces he would play, the flourishes and rapid scales that would surely impress and overwhelm his opponent. His mind was filled with confidence. He barely considered that the woman could offer anything that would truly challenge him. Meanwhile, she took a moment to breathe, sitting with a sense of readiness rather than anxiety. She did not plan to show off. She would simply let her fingers speak, letting the music convey the story she felt in her heart. The room fell into a quiet anticipation. People shifted in their seats, leaning forward, eager to witness this unusual duel. Some had seen competitions where technical prowess reigned supreme, but something about this felt different. There was a sense that what would unfold was more than just a contest of skill. It would be a meeting of two very different ways of connecting with music. When the duel began, the elitist pianist started first. He played with precision, hitting every note exactly as it should be, the scales moving rapidly under his fingers. The audience could not help but admire his skill. It was flawless, impressive, and exact. But as he played, a few listeners noticed that while it was technically perfect, it lacked warmth. It was like watching a machine perform beautifully, but without the soul that made music feel alive. He glanced at the woman, expecting to see a flicker of fear or hesitation, but instead, her eyes were calm and focused. Then it was her turn. She approached the piano with quiet grace, settling her hands on the keys. Her first notes were soft, simple, almost hesitant, but they carried an emotional depth that immediately captured the room. The audience's attention shifted, drawn not to speed or precision, but to the feeling in her music. Each note seemed to tell a story. Each chord resonated in a way that touched hearts. She played as if speaking directly to the listeners, inviting them into her experience. There were no unnecessary flourishes, no attempts to show off. Her music was honest, pure, and deeply moving. The elitist pianist's confidence began to waver as he noticed the audience's reaction. The polite applause that had greeted his performance was now replaced with murmurs of admiration and even awe for her playing. He watched as people leaned forward, eyes closed, some swaying slightly to the rhythm. Her music was connecting in a way his technically perfect performance never had. His own hands itched to play, to reclaim the attention, but something in him began to realize that this would not be an easy victory. As the duel continued, the contrast became more apparent. He played his complex pieces with precision, yet the audience's engagement remained limited. She played with simplicity and emotion, and the room seemed to breathe with her music. It was clear that skill alone was not enough. There was something intangible in her performance that words could not capture. The elitist pianist could feel a knot of uncertainty forming, a feeling unfamiliar to him. He had faced challenges before and had always emerged as the victor, but now he sensed that he might have underestimated her completely. The audience could sense the tension building. They were witnessing not just a duel of fingers on a piano, but a clash of approaches, a meeting of technical mastery and heartfelt expression. The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what would come next. The elitist pianist adjusted his posture, trying to regain the sense of control, but it was slipping. He realized that the woman's strength lay not in perfection, but in connection, in authenticity. Each note she played reached beyond technique and touched something deeper in those listening. By the time she finished her first piece, the hall erupted in applause, louder and more sincere than anything he had received. He looked around, stunned, as people turned toward her with admiration. She gave a small, humble smile, not seeking to bask in the praise, but simply acknowledging the moment. It was a quiet victory, yet it carried a power far greater than any display of technical skill could achieve. In that moment, the elitist pianist understood something he had not fully grasped before. Music was more than notes and speed. It was emotion, storytelling, and connection. The duel was far from over, but already the balance had shifted. The woman, with her simple but profound approach, had revealed a truth that would challenge his pride and change the way he viewed the art he had dedicated his life to mastering. The audience could sense it too, and a sense of anticipation and excitement filled the air, setting the stage for the next round of their unique confrontation. As he prepared for his next piece, a mix of admiration and unease washed over him. The duel had become more than a contest. It was a lesson, and he was only beginning to understand it. The simple woman, calm and focused, was ready to continue, but she needed no grand gestures. She simply let her music flow, letting the power of her emotions speak for itself. And in that hall, Filled with people from all walks of life, the stage was set for a confrontation that would be remembered long after the final note was played. After the first round, the hall remained electric with anticipation. The audience had witnessed a surprising moment, one that challenged their expectations. Whispers filled the air, people speculating about what would happen next. The elitist pianist returned to his seat, fingers resting lightly on the keys, but his usual confidence was shaken. He had faced many skilled performers before, yet none had made the audience react with such pure emotion from something so simple. He studied the woman carefully, noticing the calm focus in her eyes and the natural ease in her posture. It was unlike anything he had seen in a formal competitor. He decided to change his strategy. Instead of relying solely on speed and technical skill, he would add more dynamics, more expressive pauses, and louder crescendos. He wanted to impress not just the ear but the heart. He believed that if he pushed harder, the audience would be reminded of his superior training and experience. But deep down, there was a small seed of doubt, something he had not felt in years. He had always believed that mastery of technique was enough. Now he was starting to question that belief. The woman, meanwhile, remained calm. She did not spend her time strategizing or worrying about the competition. Her preparation was quiet, a matter of practice, reflection, and connection to the music she wanted to share. She had always played piano this way, focusing on feeling rather than perfection. Every chord, every note was chosen intuitively. She did not need to impress anyone. She needed only to express herself. Yet she understood the stakes. She knew the audience and the pianist were watching, expecting a performance that would match or exceed his technical brilliance. She drew a deep breath and allowed herself to focus entirely on the music she wanted to play next. The room felt charged as the second round began. The elitist pianist played first, his fingers moving faster than before, executing complex arpeggios and rapid passages that demonstrated his technical skill. The notes rang out sharply and clearly, filling the hall with precision. People listened closely, impressed by the sheer skill on display. Yet, despite the complexity, something was missing. The audience nodded and murmured polite appreciation, but there was no gasp of awe, no shiver of emotional response. The music was perfect, but it did not touch the soul. Then it was her turn. She moved to the piano with deliberate calmness, her hands hovering over the keys for a moment before touching them. The first notes were soft, almost tentative, but each carried a depth that resonated throughout the hall. She did not rush. She did not try to impress with difficult passages or rapid scales. Instead, she let each note speak, letting the music flow naturally from her heart. It was simple, yet every chord felt alive. Every pause was intentional. Every melody felt personal, like a story told in sound. As she played, the audience could not help but be drawn in. The music seemed to breathe with life, and each person listened as if she were speaking directly to them. Some closed their eyes, letting the sound wash over them. Others leaned forward, captivated by the honesty in every note. There were no technical fireworks, yet the performance held everyone's attention completely. It was as if the music itself had taken control of the room, inviting everyone to feel what the pianist felt. The elitist pianist watched, a mix of admiration and frustration growing within him. He had never experienced such a reaction before. The audience's focus was not on speed or complexity, but on the emotion and connection that her music brought. For the first time, he realized that skill alone was not enough to win hearts. He had trained for years, yet this woman, with no formal accolades or stage experience, was capturing attention in a way he never could. He tried to remind himself that he still had mastery of technique, but it felt hollow compared to the feeling she inspired. People around him were leaning closer, whispering their amazement to one another. They were not talking about scales or finger placement. They were talking about the feeling the music stirred within them. Some wiped away quiet tears, others smiled softly, remembering moments in their own lives that the music had evoked. It was a simple human response, one that the elitist pianist could not command, no matter how many awards he had earned. As the woman continued to play, a subtle shift occurred. The elitist pianist noticed that the audience's energy seemed to rise with each note. The room was alive with the shared experience of the music. He felt a pang of regret for underestimating her, realizing that he had judged her by appearances and reputation rather than talent. She played with humility and honesty, and it was more powerful than any complex display he could produce. His own fingers itched to respond, to reclaim dominance, but he could not compete with something so deeply authentic. He began to reflect quietly on his own approach to music. All these years, he had focused on speed, precision, and technique. He had believed that these were the keys to success, the way to impress both audiences and critics. Yet here he was, feeling overshadowed by someone whose strength lay not in perfection but in truth and expression. It was a humbling realization, and one that stirred a mix of emotions: surprise, admiration, and even a little envy. Meanwhile, the woman's playing remained consistent. She did not falter or rush, despite the pressure. Each note carried meaning. Each pause was intentional. Each melody felt like a small gift to those listening. Her music was not just a performance. It was a conversation. The audience responded unconsciously, leaning into the experience, letting their own emotions blend with the story she told through the keys. The elitist pianist could see it clearly now. This was the essence of music: connection. He could play perfectly and impress technically, but she could touch hearts in ways he had never learned. As the second round ended, the audience erupted in applause, this time louder, more heartfelt. There was no doubt who had left the deepest impression. The woman offered a small, graceful nod, acknowledging the applause without drawing attention to herself. She did not need recognition. Her reward was in the music itself, in the connection she had fostered with every listener. The elitist pianist sat in silence for a moment, letting the weight of the experience sink in. He had expected an easy victory, and yet he found himself humbled. He realized that his pride and focus on technical mastery had blinded him to a more profound truth. Music was not about showing off skill, but about touching the hearts of those who listened. He looked at the woman, recognizing the quiet strength and talent she possessed. She had played not for victory, but for expression, and it had made all the difference. The audience continued to buzz with excitement and conversation, discussing the unexpected turn of events. Some marveled at the contrast between the performers. Others were inspired by the simplicity and emotion of the woman's playing. The hall felt lighter, more connected, as people shared their appreciation and astonishment. It was a reminder that music could be both personal and communal, technical and emotional, competitive and unifying. As the performers prepared for the next stage, there was a sense of anticipation and curiosity. The elitist pianist had been shaken from his usual confidence, and the woman had quietly proven her worth without a single boast. The duel had become more than a contest. It was an exploration of what it truly meant to perform, to connect, and to be heard. Each note played, each chord struck, was now part of a larger story unfolding in real time, a story that would be remembered long after the final round. The tension and excitement set the stage for the next part of the duel. The elitist pianist, now humbled but still determined, was ready to continue. The woman, calm and composed, would follow with her natural gift for expression. The audience, fully engaged, waited in anticipation for the next chapter of this remarkable encounter between skill, humility, and the true power of music. The third round began with a tension that could almost be felt in the air. The hall had grown silent, the audience leaning forward, eager to witness what would happen next. Everyone had seen the contrast in the first two rounds, the elitist pianist's skillful precision versus the simple woman's heartfelt expression. The question now was whether this pattern would continue or shift again. Each person waited with bated breath, sensing that something extraordinary was unfolding. The elitist pianist approached the grand piano with a mixture of determination and unease. His movements were precise, almost rigid, as he sat and adjusted his posture. He had decided that for this round, he would attempt something new, hoping to regain the upper hand. He started playing a piece he had composed himself, one he considered both technically demanding and emotionally charged. The notes flowed fast and strong, his fingers moving with practiced skill. Every chord was struck with confidence, every sequence executed flawlessly. The audience admired the performance, noting the complexity and intensity. Yet, a quiet realization began to settle among them. While the pianist's skill was undeniable, the music felt calculated. There was an energy, yes, but it lacked spontaneity. It was impressive, but it did not stir the heart in the same way the woman's playing had. He could see a few audience members nodding politely, but their eyes were distant, not fully captured. He noticed the occasional shifting in chairs and whispers, signs that the spell his technical mastery usually cast was not taking hold. Across the hall, the woman prepared quietly for her turn. She walked slowly to the piano, a serene calmness surrounding her. She did not rush. She did not hesitate. She simply allowed herself to settle into the moment. Her hands hovered briefly over the keys, feeling the texture, the weight, the sound, before she began. The first notes were gentle, almost like a whisper, but they carried a depth that immediately drew the audience's attention. Her melody was simple yet profound, as if telling a story that words could not capture. As she played, the room seemed to breathe with her music. Each note had a purpose, each pause a message. There were no fast scales or complicated passages to impress. There was only emotion, pure and unadorned. People leaned forward, some closing their eyes, some swaying slightly, all of them absorbing every sound. The pianist watched, feeling a strange mixture of admiration and unease. The audience's reactions were unmistakable. They were connecting deeply with her music. It was a connection that skill alone could not achieve. The audience began to murmur quietly among themselves. They spoke of the unexpected power in her playing, the way each note seemed to touch something personal inside them. Many compared it to their own experiences with music, remembering moments when a simple melody had stirred feelings long forgotten. The woman's playing was not just a performance. It was an invitation to experience something intimate, something genuine. It was a stark contrast to the calculated brilliance of the elitist pianist's music, and that contrast had become even more apparent in this round. The elitist pianist felt a growing tension within himself. He had always believed that mastery of technique was the pinnacle of musical achievement. Yet here, in front of his eyes, someone with less formal training and fewer accolades was commanding attention and admiration in a way he had never experienced. The reality was unsettling. For the first time, he realized that music was not solely about hitting every note perfectly. It was about connection, emotion, and authenticity. Her playing was teaching him a lesson he had never expected to learn in a competition. She continued playing, each phrase flowing naturally into the next. Her fingers danced lightly, creating harmonies that were delicate but full of meaning. The audience was captivated, leaning into every chord, every pause, every shift in tone. There were smiles, quiet tears, and nods of understanding. It was as if the room itself had become part of the music, responding to the honesty she poured into every note. She played not to win, not to impress, but to express, and the impact was undeniable. The elitist pianist attempted to respond mentally. He reminded himself that he had skill, training, and experience. Perhaps he could regain dominance with the next piece, with faster passages or more dramatic flourishes. Yet, the more he watched her, the more he realized that this duel was no longer simply a contest of ability. It was a confrontation of philosophies, of approaches to music. One relied on precision, control, and technique. The other relied on instinct, feeling, and authenticity. The audience's heart had chosen, whether consciously or not, and the choice was clear. He began to feel frustration and envy mingling with respect. She was not loud, not boastful, yet she commanded the room. The audience was hanging on her every note, fully engaged and emotionally invested. He had never experienced this before in any performance, any recital, or any competition. He had been a master of skill, yet here was a woman with a simple approach, capturing attention in a way he had never thought possible. His ego felt challenged, and yet he could not deny the truth in what he saw and heard. As she continued, the atmosphere became almost sacred. The audience seemed to exist solely within the music, temporarily suspended from the outside world. Each note she played carried a subtle, human story, and it resonated deeply. The pianist observed quietly, unable to play, unable to interrupt the moment. He felt a growing awareness of his limitations, not in skill but in emotional connection. Her music was alive, breathing in a way his structured mastery never could. For the audience, it was an unforgettable experience. They were witnessing something rare, a performance that was not defined by complexity or recognition but by truth. It was music that touched the soul, music that made listeners feel seen and heard. The woman's playing reminded them that beauty could be found in simplicity, that connection was more powerful than perfection, and that authenticity often outshone technical mastery. People whispered in awe, some even reaching for tissues, moved by the genuine emotion in the room. The elitist pianist felt the weight of realization settling on him. He had come to dominate, to prove his superiority, yet he found himself humbled. He began to understand that music was a language, and she spoke it fluently without the need for accolades or complex maneuvers. Her strength was in expression, in honesty, and in the ability to communicate feelings directly to those who listened. He could match notes, scales, and technique, but she had something he had never fully cultivated, a voice that reached the heart. The duel continued, the tension between them growing more palpable. It was no longer a contest of who could play the most complex music, but a demonstration of what music truly could be. The audience, fully engaged, watched with anticipation for every turn, every phrase. The woman played with unwavering focus, her eyes occasionally glancing at the pianist but never with fear or challenge. Simply a quiet acknowledgement of the moment they shared. It was a dialogue, not a battle, and the audience felt it deeply. By the time she reached the conclusion of her piece, the hall erupted in applause that was longer and more heartfelt than anything the pianist had received. People were clapping, cheering, and some were even rising to their feet. Her performance had not only held attention but had moved the audience in ways that technical mastery alone could not. She offered a humble nod in response, her face serene, her demeanor calm. She had not sought to overpower or boast, yet she had undeniably captured the room. The elitist pianist remained seated, absorbing the moment. He felt a mixture of emotions, awe, humility, and the sting of regret. He understood that this duel had become a lesson in more than music. It was a reminder that talent alone, no matter how refined, could not replace authenticity, expression, and connection. He had underestimated her, assuming that technical mastery was enough to impress and win. Now he realized that he had been wrong. The audience buzzed with excitement, still talking about the extraordinary contrast between the performers. They were witnessing more than a duel. They were witnessing the power of human expression, the way emotion could surpass technical skill, and the reminder that true artistry often lay in honesty rather than showmanship. It was a moment that would linger in their memories, a rare event where simplicity and sincerity triumphed over pride and precision. As the third round concluded, both pianists prepared for the next stage. The elitist pianist, now humbled but still determined, adjusted his posture and took a deep breath. He had learned something vital from this experience, a lesson he could not ignore. The woman, calm and poised, moved toward the piano once again, ready to continue, yet needing no grand gestures. Her strength lay in the music itself, in her ability to convey emotion naturally and fully. The audience waited with bated breath, knowing that whatever came next would continue to reveal the profound truths that had already begun to unfold in this remarkable duel between skill, humility, and human connection. The fourth round began with an energy that was almost palpable. The audience, fully aware of the story unfolding, was completely silent, leaning forward in anticipation. Each person sensed that this round might be the most decisive yet, though no one could predict exactly how. The duel had moved beyond a simple contest of technical skill and was now a study in emotion, expression, and human connection. The elitist pianist returned to the grand piano with a sense of urgency. His usual calm, composed demeanor had been replaced by a restless focus. He knew that the previous rounds had not gone as expected. The woman's ability to capture the hearts of the audience with simple, expressive music had shaken his confidence. He had spent years mastering technique, perfecting every scale, and executing every passage with precision. Yet here was a performer without formal accolades, capturing attention in a way he never imagined. He was determined to regain control, to assert his skill, and to remind everyone of his mastery. He began to play, his fingers moving rapidly over the keys. This time, he tried to infuse more emotion into his performance, adding pauses, swells, and dramatic flourishes. Every note was executed with exact precision, yet his hands trembled slightly as he reached for the highest notes. The audience listened intently, still impressed by his skill, but the warmth and authenticity that had drawn them to the woman's music were missing. They could feel the effort, the concentration, and the pressure in his playing. It was beautiful, yet it lacked the natural flow that made music feel alive. Across the hall, the woman prepared for her turn. She sat calmly, letting her fingers rest lightly on the keys. She did not rush. She did not strategize. She simply allowed herself to connect with the music in her own way. Her eyes closed for a moment, taking a deep breath, feeling the vibrations of the piano beneath her hands. Her approach was not about proving anything, but about expressing what she felt, allowing the music to tell a story from her heart. When she began to play, the atmosphere shifted immediately. Her first notes were soft, almost fragile, yet they carried an undeniable power. Every chord, every pause, every melody line resonated with emotion. The audience was captivated, leaning in closer, some closing their eyes to fully absorb the sound. Her music spoke to them in ways that transcended technique and skill. It was intimate, personal, and profoundly moving. The pianist watched, his chest tight with a mixture of admiration, frustration, and growing realization. He understood that she was not just playing notes. She was communicating feelings, painting pictures in sound, and creating an experience that words could not describe. As she continued, the audience responded in a way that was almost physical. Some swayed gently to the rhythm, others held their breath during quiet moments, and a few wiped away tears that had escaped unnoticed. The music created a shared experience, connecting everyone in the room through a simple, heartfelt performance. It was a reminder that music was not just about competition or skill, but about connection, empathy, and the ability to move people deeply. The elitist pianist felt a pang of regret. He had underestimated her, assuming that his technical mastery would easily outshine her simple approach. Now, he saw that his understanding of music had been incomplete. Technique could impress, but it could not touch the soul. He realized that for all his training and achievements, he had never truly experienced the power of music as a means of emotional connection. Watching her play was teaching him a lesson he could not ignore. Her performance continued, building gradually in intensity without ever losing its simplicity. She played with a natural rhythm, her hands moving effortlessly across the keys, yet each note was filled with meaning. The pianist tried to anticipate what she would do next, but there was no pattern, no predictability. Her music flowed organically, guided by feeling rather than strategy. The audience could sense this authenticity and responded with full attention and genuine emotion. The pianist attempted to regain his composure, reminding himself that he could still dominate with his skill. He began to play again, his fingers moving with lightning speed, executing complex arpeggios and fast passages. Yet the effect was different now. The audience was no longer solely focused on him. Their attention had shifted, caught by the woman's ability to communicate so deeply through her music. The applause that had followed his previous performances was now polite but muted, while hers had evoked heartfelt reactions and standing ovations. A subtle tension filled the room. It was no longer a duel of notes and scales. It was a confrontation of philosophy. One approach relied on technical perfection, mastery, and control. The other relied on authenticity, feeling, and connection. The audience could feel the contrast in every note, every pause, every melody. The elitist pianist understood that the outcome was not determined by his skill alone, but by something far more powerful and intangible. The woman's music continued to flow, each phrase building naturally from the last. She did not rush, she did not try to force dramatic effect. Instead, she allowed the story within the music to unfold on its own. Her ability to communicate through sound was mesmerizing, drawing the audience into a shared emotional space. They laughed softly at light, joyful passages, and they paused in silence at more somber moments. Each person in the room felt that they were part of something meaningful, something human and profound. The pianist could no longer deny the truth before him. His confidence had been shaken, his ego bruised, and yet he could not help but feel a growing respect for her. She had achieved something that he could not, despite all his training and experience. She had reached the audience's hearts in a way he had never learned to do. The realization was both humbling and enlightening. He began to reflect on his own journey as a musician, understanding that he had focused too much on technical achievement and too little on emotional connection. By the time the woman reached the climax of her performance, the hall was completely enraptured. Every listener was fully engaged, some moved to tears, others smiling quietly, all absorbed in the experience she was creating. Her music was not about competition or victory. It was about expression, about sharing a piece of herself with everyone present. It was a lesson in humility, authenticity, and the power of simplicity. As the final notes faded into silence, the hall erupted in applause, louder and more sincere than anything the pianist had received. People stood, clapping enthusiastically, some cheering, others simply holding their hands to their hearts in admiration. The woman gave a small, gracious nod, acknowledging the audience without drawing attention to herself. She had not sought to dominate or boast, yet she had undeniably left a mark on everyone present. The elitist pianist sat at his piano, absorbing the moment. He felt a mix of emotions: regret for underestimating her, admiration for her talent, and awe at the connection she had created with the audience. He understood now that the duel had become more than a contest of skill. It was a revelation of what music could truly be. It was a reminder that technical mastery alone was not enough, that authenticity and emotional expression could surpass even the most refined skill. The audience continued to buzz with excitement, discussing the unexpected turn of events. They were witnessing a rare and powerful experience, one that would linger in their memories. The duel had become a testament to the human capacity for expression, connection, and emotion. The woman's playing had shown them that true artistry was not about accolades or recognition, but about honesty, feeling, and the ability to touch others' hearts. As both performers prepared for the final round, there was a sense of anticipation and reflection. The elitist pianist, now humbled and introspective, adjusted his posture and took a deep breath. He had learned something vital from this experience, a lesson that went far beyond technical skill. The woman, calm and poised, approached the piano with quiet confidence, ready to continue. Her strength lay not in showmanship, but in her ability to communicate through music. The audience waited eagerly, knowing that the final round would reveal the ultimate message of this extraordinary duel. That true power in music comes not from complexity or technique, but from heart, authenticity, and the courage to express oneself fully. The final round began with a sense of quiet anticipation that filled every corner of the hall. The audience was completely focused, leaning forward as if they could hear even the softest whisper of the piano. This round would decide not just the winner of the duel, but also the lessons each performer would take away from this extraordinary experience. There was an air of respect now, for both musicians, even as the tension between them remained palpable. The elitist pianist approached the grand piano with a mixture of determination and humility. His usual arrogance had been tempered by the previous rounds. He knew now that technical mastery alone was not enough to impress the audience or convey the true power of music. He took a deep breath, placing his fingers carefully on the keys. He would play not only with skill but with a renewed focus on emotion, hoping to blend technique with feeling in a way he had never attempted before. He began playing, his fingers gliding over the keys with precision, but this time there was more subtlety in his approach. He allowed moments of softness and quiet reflection, weaving emotion into his performance. The audience listened intently, appreciating both the skill and the effort to convey feeling. Yet, as impressive as it was, it still lacked the natural warmth and authenticity that had captivated them when the woman played. He realized that while he could attempt to mimic emotional expression, it was never quite as genuine as what came effortlessly from the heart. The woman prepared for her turn with her usual calm demeanor. She did not plan or strategize, nor did she try to outshine her opponent. She simply sat at her piano, closed her eyes for a moment, and let herself feel the music she wanted to share. Her connection to the instrument was intuitive, her fingers moving as if guided by memory and emotion rather than thought. She did not seek validation or applause. She played because the music was a part of her, and sharing it was her natural response. When she began, the hall seemed to breathe along with her. The first notes were soft, almost hesitant, but they quickly grew into a melody that filled the space with warmth and depth. Every chord resonated with emotion, every pause seemed intentional, and every phrase told a story. The audience was captivated, leaning in to catch each subtle nuance, completely immersed in the experience. Unlike technical skill which could be measured and replicated, this music was alive. It communicated directly with the hearts of the listeners, drawing them into a shared emotional journey. The elitist pianist watched, a mixture of admiration and quiet introspection filling him. He understood now that he was witnessing something beyond competition. This was a performance rooted in honesty, simplicity, and the courage to express feelings openly. The audience's reaction was immediate and profound. Some leaned forward, eyes closed, letting the music wash over them. Others smiled softly, touched by memories or emotions the melody stirred. A few wiped away tears, moved by the authenticity and depth of her performance. The pianist realized that this connection, this ability to touch hearts so deeply, was something he had never achieved through technical skill alone. The woman continued playing, building the piece gradually without losing its natural flow. Each note, each pause, and each transition was imbued with meaning. The audience could sense the story unfolding, feeling as if they were part of it. Her music was not about showing off skill or impressing with complexity. It was about conveying a truth, a human experience that was universal yet deeply personal. The room seemed to resonate with the emotions she poured into her performance, and it was clear that the duel had become more than a contest. It was a lesson in what music truly could be. The elitist pianist felt a deep sense of humility. He had come to dominate, to prove his superiority, yet he found himself learning from her. He had spent years focusing on precision, control, and technique, but he had neglected the essential human element of music. Watching her, he realized that true artistry required both skill and the ability to connect with others on a personal level. He felt a mix of regret and enlightenment, understanding that his approach had been incomplete. As the piece progressed, the audience's engagement deepened. They were no longer simply watching a performance. They were part of an emotional journey. Each note, each chord, each phrase seemed to touch something within them, evoking memories, feelings, and reflections. The music created a shared experience that transcended words, and the room seemed alive with the power of human connection. It was a reminder that music was not just entertainment. It was a bridge between hearts, a language that could communicate the inexpressible. The pianist tried once more to assert his presence, adding intensity and speed to his playing. He executed complex sequences flawlessly, demonstrating his technical mastery. Yet the audience's attention remained with the woman's performance. They were drawn to the authenticity and emotional depth she provided, not to the complexity or speed of the notes. It was a humbling realization for him. Skill could impress, but it could not move people in the same way that genuine expression could. The woman's music flowed effortlessly, her hands moving with grace and precision, yet guided by intuition rather than calculation. She allowed the story within the music to unfold naturally, creating an experience that was both intimate and universal. The audience responded with deep appreciation, some visibly moved, others silently reflecting on the emotions stirred within them. It was a powerful moment, one that transcended competition and showcased the true essence of artistry. As she reached the final notes, the hall was completely enraptured. There was a silence that followed, heavy with emotion and anticipation. The audience waited, as if holding their breath, before erupting into a wave of applause that was both enthusiastic and heartfelt. People rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, and expressing their admiration. The woman gave a small, gracious nod, acknowledging the audience without seeking the spotlight. Her humility and authenticity had left an indelible impression on everyone present. The elitist pianist sat at his piano, reflecting on what had just occurred. He felt a mixture of emotions: humility, admiration, regret, and newfound understanding. He recognized that this duel had been about far more than skill or competition. It had been a lesson in authenticity, expression, and human connection. The woman's performance had revealed a truth he had overlooked for years: that music was most powerful when it touched the heart, not just the mind. The audience continued to buzz with excitement, discussing the extraordinary contrast between the performers. They marveled at the simplicity and honesty of the woman's music, and many were inspired by the way she had communicated through sound. The duel had become a shared experience, a story of learning, humility, and the unexpected power of genuine expression. It was clear that both performers had grown through the encounter, albeit in different ways. The elitist pianist finally stood and approached the woman, offering a nod of respect. He had learned a lesson he would not forget. True mastery included not only technical skill but also the ability to convey emotion and connect with others. The woman, in turn, accepted the gesture with quiet grace, her humility unchanged despite her undeniable impact. There was a sense of mutual respect, a recognition that each had brought something valuable to the stage. As the audience gradually filed out, there was a feeling that something extraordinary had taken place. People would talk about this duel for years to come, not because of who had technically won, but because of the profound human connection that had been created. The music had reminded everyone present that artistry was about honesty, courage, and the willingness to express what was within. The duel had transcended competition and become a testament to the power of music as a force for emotion, connection, and understanding. In the quiet that followed, the hall seemed to retain the echoes of the music, the lingering emotion, and the shared experience. The elitist pianist reflected on his journey, recognizing the importance of balance between skill and authenticity. He knew that his perspective on music had changed forever, that he would approach performance with greater empathy and awareness. The woman, too, felt the significance of the moment. Though she remained humble, her focus always on the music itself. The final lesson of the duel was clear. Music was not merely a contest of ability, but a bridge between people, a language of emotion that could reach deeper than words. The elitist pianist had been humbled, the woman had been recognized, and the audience had been touched in a way that would remain with them long after the final note had faded. It was a story of human connection, of learning and growth, and of the transformative power of music when played with sincerity and heart. As the performers left the stage, there was a sense of completion, a shared understanding that something meaningful had been created. The duel was over, but the impact remained. The audience carried the memory with them. The lessons lingered for the pianist, and the simple woman had left a mark on everyone's hearts. In the end, it was not about winning or losing, but about the courage to express oneself honestly and the ability to touch others through the universal language of music. It was a moment of real-life magic, one that would inspire and resonate for years to come.